So I saw Jaws for the first time tonight. Now, I know, someone who's been studying and reviewing films as long as I have, that probably sounds like sacrilege, but considering the multitudes of films that have existed over the course of the medium's history, there's naturally going to be some films that I just haven't seen yet. I keep a running list of classic films that I need to watch, and I've been steadily knocking them off, and now Jaws is one of them. Because fortunately for me, the local theater chain, and I think this is theaters across the country, is showing Jaws in theaters in commemoration of the film's 50th anniversary. And so it's featuring a brand new 4K restoration of the film. And so if there was ever a way for me to see it for the first time, in a theater is definitely the way to go. Now, the influence of Jaws, both on the film industry as well as film as a medium, it can't be overstated. It's the film that created the summer blockbuster as we know it today. For those of you who don't know, prior to the release of Jaws, most studios wouldn't bother releasing films in the summer because the logic was, well, people aren't going to be going to a movie theater in the summer. They're going to be going to the beach. They're going to be going to the park. They're going to be out and about. And so it was kind of considered a bit of a dead zone, which is why it was a bit of a gamble for Spielberg and his team to release it in the middle of the summer. And then it made a bunch of money, and the rest is literally history. So there's obviously that influence, but then there's also just a lot of the more technical influences in terms of how the film is made and presented that we still see its influences throughout the industry as a whole. And I'm not talking just with parodies of Jaws or people kind of homaging the film. I'm talking in terms of actual technique here. And one of the big techniques that sticks out to me is how Spielberg builds tension and suspense, something that I think a lot of modern films have been almost forgetting how to do as of late. A large part of what makes suspense work is having the audience know what's going to happen before the characters do, because then all the viewer can do is just watch and wait for the shoe to drop. And we get this right out of the gate. Our first shot of the film is a POV shot from the shark's perspective. We get the title credits and everything, and then we see the teenagers on the beach. We all know what's going to happen. One of them is going to get killed. And again, all you can do is watch and wait to see who the unlucky teen is. And that is what sets the tone for the entire film. Another part of this that also adds to that is this looming sense of dread that emerges over the film, especially right out of the gate when you have Chief Brody trying to close off the beaches, but then of course the mayor, being a politician, decides to ignore the problem for the sake of profit. Nice to know nothing's really, changed about our modern society. Anyway, you have that overwhelming sense of dread, and as it just escalates and escalates and escalates, you have that tension just build and build and build. And then I would argue that things change when you get to the second half of the film, which is when Brody, Quint, and Hooper set out to hunt down the shark. Here's where I think you see some of the really strongest moments where Spielberg is building tension and suspense. I mean, naturally, there's the famous scene where it's basically Quint's monologue talking about how he survived the sinking of the USS Indianapolis during World War II and how members of his crew were picked off bit by bit by bit by sharks. And you don't see any flashbacks, you don't see any visuals of it. It is carried by the performance. But the way the sequence is shot, even though it's just someone talking and telling their story, you still, with the way the scene is blocked, the way it's framed, you still get that nice sense of tension and suspense. And it really shows how the camera can reinforce this. And when it comes to all the other moments of suspense, during that second half of the film, a lot of the suspense is built up in those moments where the characters can only just wait. I mean, if it were made in modern day, they probably would try to skip over it, try to make some sort of miraculous thing of, oh, we found the shark right away. Oh, we're building up to this final climax. Whereas this film is like, no. You're going to slow down and you're going to wait. Like these characters who have to slow down and wait. And so naturally you have that sense of looming tension and suspense, especially as tensions start to run high amongst the three of them. You also see the three of them bond over time. And you just get this nice roller coaster of emotions as they're unified in a shared stress of, hey, we have to hunt down this giant killer shark. And even the final moments of the film, if I had to describe it, it very much is the cinematic equivalent of a knockdown, drag-out fight. And it's not even like we're just gonna do it in the typical modern way where we're basically like seeing like the grand hero. It's like, no, you see things worn down, where you basically see both sides are essentially giving it their all, literally. And it's only until like the final moments where you get the final confrontation that it literally all comes to a head. And it is all masterfully built up to it. Another thing that also stuck out to me while watching this film, I mean, yeah, it's Spielberg, is his use of what we often call the Spielberg oneer. Now, what a oneer is, for those of you who aren't familiar with filmmaking terminology, a oneer is basically a shot where you basically have an entire scene play out in one take. The reason it's called the Spielberg oneer is because he's the filmmaker who's kind of codified it. He didn't invent it. In fact, it had been used in a lot of films prior to Spielberg. It's just his oneers have a particular style to them. Every Frame of Painting has a video that breaks it down in much greater detail than I can, but the things that I noticed is how you can see changes in composition, changes in blocking, and how it conveys different pieces of information over the course of one scene. And it is, again, a master class on how to make a film and have it be visually interesting, even if you're just doing a dialogue scene meant to convey either exposition or just basic information to the audience. There's a way to make it visually interesting, and it's definitely a much more interesting way to show it rather than the usual shot reverse shot that a lot of modern filmmakers have become overly reliant upon, in my opinion. I mean, I could gush about this film forever and ever and ever, but it's Spielberg. Of course, it's a classic. Let's try that again. Now, I could gush about this film for hours upon hours upon hours, but it's a Spielberg film. Of course, it's going to be an amazing film. I mean, if you have the opportunity to watch Jaws in theaters, I highly recommend you do so. They're probably only showing it for this weekend because of the 50th anniversary, but if you haven't seen it, definitely go see it at these showings. It is well worth it. And yeah, now I'm just gonna go home and reevaluate my dreams of filmmaking for the umpteenth time. But until then, I will see you all next time.